Dude, I just started. Yep, there he goes. It's gonna be a recurring theme, isn't it? All right, let's start. Let's start over again. Welcome back to the multi-part series on how to play 1v1 maps in Tsel Division 2. So, in this episode, we're going to be looking at Tsel. This map's a little challenging for new players to the game as it's a very dense map. Just looking at it from a zoomed out perspective, you can see a lot of very dense forest, small tree lines, just really close quarters, nasty fighting that can happen here with some challenging roads. Like we've done before, we're going to be starting looking at this map from the red perspective, and then we'll be switching over to the blue perspective. With that said, we'll go from left to right like we've been doing. So when we look at the left side here, as you can see, there's one dominating highway here on the left flank of the map, as well as a dominating road on the top of the hill here. And if you can't tell, this right here is a plateau. So you get some elevation from sitting tanks up on it, or anti-tank guns and what have you. Then you also have this town right here with the church tower and some good lines of sight from the buildings in it. You have the farmstead, this tree line that's a good defensible position for the blue side, and then a little clearing right here until you get to this other village that has good lines of sight overlooking the opponent's spawn point. Now, when we're looking at this from the Reds' perspective, let's think about it from an attacking point of view and a defending point of view. When you're attacking blue here, you're obviously going to want to take this road to try to get into the town as quick as possible. Some good lines of sight for that is right here, which just completely looks down the road, so this helps a lot. And then you can just kind of walk your way through. This isn't in the tree line here, but you can kind of get some good lines of sight in the tree line as well. Especially right up here is a really good place to put an anti-tank gun or a machine gun or an IG just to sit them down here to command that road. So you can get a good spot here and get a good spot back here, and you can help cover your guys as they advance on the town. But do note, trying to get an anti-tank gun or machine gun here in the start of the game is quite difficult, as your opponent might be attacking you as well, and they can easily contest this point off the start of the map. So just be aware of this point right here being a little contested if you're going to put an MG there or something. Now, with the other lines of sight here, it's going to be pretty cookie cutter. You just really have a tree line here that you can set up any kind of infantry or snipers or machine guns, what have you, to help cover your advance into the town and to give fire support. You can also try infiltrating into the forest here, as the town's cut off with a line of sight here from this tree line. If your opponent doesn't have much in here, or they're dense in the dense forest here playing defensive, not looking out, you can definitely sneak some recon, anti-tank, or just general infantry around the flank here. Typically, you don't want to put tanks through here. I typically don't try to put tanks around because a Panzerschreck or bazooka can easily come through the town, hit you, go back into the tree line, go back into the town. It's that simple. Or you run into one or a tank sitting out on this road or in this tree line here. So once you've pushed up here, it's always a good idea to use this tree line to infiltrate the town here, because as you can see, you're very covered. The only part right here that you have to cross is open, so your opponent will probably set up defenses right here if they're playing defensive, or they'll have units in this part of the trees trying to contest your movement here. But if you want to attack the town, it's a great flanking position, as is coming up through here on the side of the town. Now, this town is still commanding, as it does have lines of sight down the road on you, but as the trees are on the flank there covering the town, you can also use those trees against it as well. Now, let's look more towards this part of the right or left side of the map here. Now, obviously, right here is a good line of sight to get a machine gun or an AT gun or an IG setup to cover this right here, this little farmstead, and the road leading into the town. But it's kind of hard. You got to wheel the AT up here or the IG up here, so it's a little slow, but it could pay off. As back here, it may seem like a good little line of sight, but the buildings cut it off. Now, right here is a pretty obvious line of sight, but it could still be pretty decent if you want to help cover this tree line here, or you just want to put an AT gun or an IG or some kind of tank here just to cover the field, because your left flank's covered there from the forest. Now, right here, though, you have a good line of sight from this road and the tree line right here, so an IG or an AT gun can help cut off any units trying to come through the field this way. When we look at the town itself, it does have a church tower, which has a great line of sight on the road. So a machine gun or sniper is a great little unit to put here to help cover this road and the farmstead here, but they'll be susceptible to fire from units over here. Even though it tells you they don't have a line of sight, since it is elevated, it can see out around to the 1,000 to 1,500 meter mark generally. So something to keep in the back of your mind when you're using a church tower. But this town here has some good lines of sight. So right here is a very good defensible position in this little building to cover the left side. Right here is a very good defensible position on the right side of the town to cover the road, the approach on the hill, the farmstead here. Same with this building, same with this building, not as much, but still good. This one's very good for covering your flank right here with the green or the light trees. And here obviously is another good position just to help cover the road and the farmstead here. And that just continues out through this town. This is a really good town with a lot of good lines of sight, so you can move around a lot in the town. But it is quite open. As you can see here, there's some gaps in the town, so just be careful when maneuvering troops in the town. But if you're playing a little more defensive, you can obviously set some guys up in the farmstead here, which has some good supporting lines of sight for one another. And then same here with the tree line, can help cover this town from your farmstead if you're wanting to play back just a little bit. But I wouldn't recommend that. Always try to take this town off the start. Don't let your opponent get into it. Now, how you play this side of the map, I like being aggressive and coming into playing defensive here, pushing aggressively here, because of something that cuts into more of the middle of the map. Lines of sight on this resupply road right here. So if you zoom out and think about it strategically, your opponent, if you're pushing right here, is going to reinforce through this road right here, as it's the most direct route to this point, and you don't have to go through this gap right here to reinforce or through the trees to get to the town. Now, the best thing to do here is to get up into advanced positions in this tree line here with tanks or AT guns and just have a commanding field of view over that resupply road right down there. So that forces your opponent to be like, oh, they're shooting at our road juncture that's right outside of our spawn. We need to take care of that right away. And you also cover the valley down there and the subsequent tree line off to the left a little bit and the farmstead. So it's a pretty good spot to take, but just be aware this tree line is susceptible to fire from that left side green forest we were talking about earlier. And you can just play with the line of sight tool. As you can see, there's a lot of positions all up and down this tree line here. That's really good. But when you push up with red and you get into this position, you completely can cut off their spawn point here with a good tank or AT gun placement. You cover that main road from this spawn here and this spawn here if they want to come down this road this way. And then even in here in the green trees, you can do the same thing, which will offer you more cover and some good lines of sight as well. Not so much back here, as you can kind of get on the road there, as you can see, but it's not as good as this position here and here. And then even back here, you can play a little more defensive and still cut the road off. But you'll be susceptible to infantry attacks from the trees here if you're not careful enough. Now, when we make it up into the town here, typically you'll see people put units here and here, which are good spots. This is really good for being defensive. Even if you put an AT gun here, it can cover the road. And this little farmstead right here is really good for being defensive. You're covered by this farmhouse right here, so if they come up the road here, you can hit them really quick on the side. This windmill gives you the same bonus as a church does, so it gives you elevation. You can see more around, you can see over things. So it's a good place to put a recon unit or a sniper or machine gun in here just to be able to fire down on the road here. Now, those are the advanced positions here I use in the town. Typically, I don't like rolling anything up here. It's susceptible to getting killed in a tank battle from immediately in their spawn point. So what I like doing is I like digging in behind the lip of the hill, leave these guys here just to tell me what's coming up. Put maybe a guy here with an AT gun if I can get him into that position. But I like holding these buildings here and the flank right here of this forest to help cover this road approach, as well as putting, like we talked about earlier, the AT guns in the back to help cover the road, and then digging in the town. Nothing too crazy here. Probably the craziest thing that we saw is the line of sight on that road right here and right here. That's about it. It's really hard to push this spawn point here. You will never get this flag. Like, that flag placement's awful. It's right outside of the deployment, as with this one. So don't even bother about trying to ever get these flags. You're not going to get them. Now, let's move more towards the middle of the map. Obviously, from the red perspective, we can see the blue hill. We think, oh, well, they have a really good position right here. They have some nice, big old, thick green tree lines here. But one key thing is, look what's behind your hill. a good road juncture. You have a Y, little fork in the road that splits off to the left side of the hill, to the right side of the hill. And your approach is pretty well covered by this town until you hit the lip of the, or the mouth of the town, and then you start opening up to this green tree line here. But even right here, even though you're susceptible to the little valley right here, you can still get up into the tree line pretty quickly, but this is the best way to get into these trees. Now, these trees are pretty crowded. There's not a lot here to defend, but your opponent doesn't have any good roads to get up to the hill. They're going to have to come down this supply road, maybe come up this way, drive up through the field, come down this road, take a left to come through the field here, come up, or come down this road here, drive, turn off, come up here, come up through this way. So one thing to take into account is pushing this hill can be quite easy in terms of having to deal with reinforcements. But the issue is this forest is very easy to defend in a more tactical sense rather than the strategic sense with reinforcements. Reason being is you have this nice light tree line here that you can just sit behind with your green cover, shoot out, pull back a little bit. Your opponent has to come up, go into the light cover, which you can pop out, try to get them with, and come back in, back and forth to give you some stealth bonuses there. As well as right here, you get some good lines of sight on the corner into where your opponent would have weapons set up here, so on and so forth. So, a little speaking from the blue perspective there, just something to keep in account when you're playing as red here. So bringing a tank up right here is a really good idea to cover right here, put a tank in here to cover here, and just try to command this hill with as much firepower as you can as red, and try to blow through this these trees here, because blue's going to have a hard time resupplying it. Now this little tree line right here is crucial to taking as well, because if you can get a little good foothold in here, you can cover the lip of the hill here where there's no cover, as well as this road, and any reinforcements that come down this road, you can block them from helping the flag right here. And also helps defend your farmstead right here. The reason we talked about the hill here first is because this hill is crucial to holding the valley down here, as well as this hill to holding the valley. If you completely lose the lines of sight here, you're going to lose the flag here, and they're going to start pushing into your trees here. Now, holding this flag can be very difficult. It may seem like a good position from the blue, you may seem like red has a good position from the blue perspective, but when you're looking at it from the red perspective, trying to reinforce the road here can be quite dangerous and perilous. If your opponent puts an AT gun here, you're going to be susceptible to attack on this road. So what are you going to do? Drive through the field here, up through, into the farmstead. Takes a long time, but it's your safest route. Or stop here, come through the light trees, come up into here, unload and walk up. That's also your safest route too. So it's really hard to reinforce this point right here. That's why getting this part of the hill and this part of the hill is crucial. Now taking here as well as red, if you take and contest this forest here and take it, you have a really good position to flex from, because it keeps your opponent from being able to move through the field and try to flank you here in the middle or on the hill. You cover the flank of the hill right here, and you cover the flank of the farmstead here as well. So holding this forest here with flamethrowers or pioneers or close quarter infantry is a great idea. Now, there's really no crazy lines of sight, mainly just covering the road here. Pretty typical stuff that you can play with on your own, as well as right here. Maybe right here if you want to really get crazy with it, but there's nothing out of the ordinary here. So don't worry too much about lines of sight, other than the obvious that you can play with. Now let's move on to the right side of the map for red. Pushing the right side for red can be easy if your opponent doesn't prioritize this side of the map. Typically, if blue isn't pushing the right side of the map, red can push, but I wouldn't recommend making this the focal point of your push, mainly just because the flags are so far back and your flag is so far forward. You want to play more defensive here. Now, sometimes you'll have some good skirmishes in the swamp here, which can always be key to say, hey, if I can hold the swamp and they're trying to flank me, I'll be in a good spot. But what I've noticed lately is that a lot of players just look at that swamp and go, man, that's too much of a pain in the ass to deal with just it being such a choke point here. Put a sniper here, you cut off movement right here, dig in right here with like a machine gun, you can cut off the buildings here, but these buildings here can also cut you off in the swamp. It's just a rough position to really push through, and honestly, it's not really worth it. So don't really worry too much about the swamp. There are good lines of sight in the swamp, but you're not going to be really getting any armored vehicles in here. It's just going to be strictly infantry, and even anti-tank guns will have a hard time getting into the swamp, as there's few crossing points they can walk into it from, and it just takes too long for them to walk in. Like right here's a great line of sight on your opponent's supply road, but it's susceptible to being attacked by recon infantry here. Just kind of keep an eye on it, but don't make it a focal point. Holding this farmstead and taking this forest right here is really important, because if you lose this farmstead, you lose your flag, and it's really hard to reinforce here as you come out. There's no cover here. What are you going to do? What do we talk about? You're going in the swamp? No. You try to come behind here and come around here. Well, your opponent knows you're going to go that way. So if you can hold this position here, hold this tree line here, pushes your front forward and gives you some cover, as you can see, to move units freely here and call on reinforcements if you are under attack and you require reinforcements. No crazy lines of sight, really. I guess you could say right here or right here. There's a windmill here that you can be wary of. Put a recon unit in there, helps you get some lines of sight. But other than that, there's no crazy lines of sight over here. Just very typical tactical thinking. If you can hold the buildings here, hold the tree line here, and the farmstead, and there's the lines of sight here, just use your terrain to your advantage. You can hold off enemy pushes pretty well. Like a machine gun here will be key. A sniper in here could be really useful. Flamethrowers to cover your flank here from the farmstead could all be crucial. But this little farmstead here and here are both really important, because you cover the road for your opponent to come up and reinforce the hill here, as well as cutting off this tree line here. Because you're so close to it, you can look into the forest, spot enemies pretty easily, and take them out. One thing I recommend doing in the start is trying to get units in here to contest this. So it's pretty similar to this point on the map for red. If you can test this and you can test this, you help cover your flank for the hill here. You help cover your flank for the town here, as this is pretty much a strong point for blue. Now, that's pretty much red. There's no crazy lines of sight on this map like the other maps we talked about. Pretty simple, pretty cookie cutter. Only one more thing to say for red in this perspective is red is the bad side of the map. This is not the good side of the map, just mainly because your flags are so close to the front. These three right here. While meanwhile, blue literally have two flags that are inside of their spawn almost. This is one of the maps I hope Eugen reworks the flag placement on, because it's really atrocious. If the map was flipped this way, maybe it'd be a little better, but who knows what Eugen will do. Because in Army General, it actually is flipped this way, I do believe. And it's kind of a lot of fun to play on, because you have to like push up the side here through the trees, but that's a topic for another day. Now let's look at it from the blue perspective, starting on the right side and going to the left, just to keep with continuity as we did on this side. So as we talked about, watch out for lines of sight down the road here from red. They'll definitely be trying to snipe your transports here, but you also have the benefit of being able to try to bum rush this point here, as you can set up machine guns and anti-tank guns and infantry to help cover this right here. So putting a tank in the mouth of the town here is a good idea to cover the road while you try to break off into the trees. If you're able to get smoke in the mouth of the forest here, and you're able to break off into these tree lines here with close quarters infantry, you're going to be in a really good spot. Main reason being, you're going to force your opponent to come down a road that you also have lines of sight on and force you out of this thick, dense forest. Now, if you make your push in an effective manner and you get this flag and you take the road juncture here, wheel left. A lot of people don't. A lot of people in this game just think vertically. They don't think laterally or horizontally. They just move in a straight line down the road. They don't move left to right a lot. But a lot of the time, if you have like a tank push here going in the start, there's a bunch of MCHAs or Panzer IVs, and you win your engagement. You have some dudes in half tracks that you can mount back up, get them back in their half tracks, peel a couple of tanks off, flank the town here. You could have another diversionary force here that's skirmishing with the town, hit them in the flank, and you could collapse this whole front up here. And that's key, because if your opponent takes this point from you and they get stuck into here, as we talked about, they're going to cut off your supply, your line of resupply here, which could threaten these flags for you. So taking this road juncture is key to taking this town here, as well obviously as taking this flag, as this flag is the road juncture itself. So keep that in mind. No crazy lines of sight here. Like if you get an AT gun here, sure, but nothing that's going to be really game breaking or game changing. But if you have the ability to get AT guns like in positions like this, you've already probably won the game if you can maneuver that well, that deep into your enemies' positions. But just basic lines of sight here, as we kind of talked about before, just around the tree lines. Just be smart with it. If you want to play defensive, play defensive. Just watch out for flanks. Same here. Your opponent's going to do what we talked about. Do the same thing to them. Don't give up these trees here. Fight for them. Now over here, it's a good idea to put a tank right here, an IG here, machine gun here, to help your push on the town, because you can do the same thing to red here. You can push the town, but red is inherently going to be in a more defensible position. It's easy for them to get into the town, provides more covered lines of fire. This farmstead is pretty isolated out in the open, but it gives you cover. So if you want to use it as your kind of like your anchor with a machine gun to help push into the town, you can definitely do that. But this is probably the only craziest line of sight you can get. Set a good medium tank up here, cut off reinforcements, force tanks to skirmish with you, but that's really it. So that's about it here for the push side of the hill. If you make it up to your opponent's hill here, it's going to be pretty obvious. Line of sight straight down to their spawn here. Line of sight straight down to their spawn here. Line of sight here, again, straight into their spawn. Again, over here, down on the road. Your opponent, if you are able to push up to this far, if you start flexing out into this road over here, which I've done before, it's hard for them to reinforce as there's no immediate bridge that comes over to this road. They have to come down this road up in this way, or down this road and up in this way. Now, if you're able to push up here and you're able to hold the trees here, you can threaten the flank of the town. And you can also push into these trees and start skirmishing with your opponent, threatening this flag, forcing them to dump resources into the dense forests where information is lacking, tanks aren't that effective, creating a really nasty dogfight. But if we look here, you also have some lines of sight in the valley here. Not a very aggressive line of sight, more defensive if they're trying to push through, but it's something to keep in mind. Here you have a good line of sight that covers these buildings right here in the farmstead, something that you might be able to use for some fire support down into the valley, into the farm if you're pushing it. That's really about it for the lines of sight here. Like I said, nothing crazy. Now looking from the more middle-oriented perspective, if you're going to push through here, just be wary of AT guns here. You can get into some really nasty engagements if you're not careful. A good spot for AT guns is right about here. You help cover the road. A good spot is also right here. Gives you a lot more, as you can see, more lines of sight to help cover that road. But as we talked about before, try to use the trees on this map to your advantage to conceal your movements and mask what you're doing. So if you're able to unload infantry in this yellow tree line here and get some fire support, move some tanks through here, help your guys in the forest here, making them think that, hey, they're going to push these trees here while you infiltrate with infantry into the farmstead right here, which you can also support from this tree line here and this tree line here. If you're able to get units into these trees, getting units into them can be very difficult because this road is so open that you can get sniped from these trees here, or even maybe these trees right here. So just keep that in mind. Pushing this farmstead is pretty easy. As we talked about earlier, it's hard for them to reinforce it. It's a very similar situation that we've talked about over here and on our hill right here, which leads me into talking about the hill here. Already looked at some line of sights here. Just be really wary about your opponent being able to mask their movement here on the base of the hill. If you don't have these trees here, people really like putting Shermans here and popping up, hitting your guys here, popping back down, and playing whack-a-mole with you. Like we said, though, defending these trees is really easy to do. You can put just armored cars in here, flamethrowers, Panzerschrecks, what have you, and it can really be a pain trying to clear out these trees. But like we said before, no crazy lines of sight. Yeah, you can get some lines of sight in the trees here, but you're probably not going to ever be using it for that. This is probably the one you'll use the most if you want to cover these trees with like a light tank or cheaper fire support weapon of some kind. But just really here as the blue side, you're going to be playing defensive. If your push in the valley here is successful, then yes, you can push the hill, but the hill will not be the focal point of your attack in the valley middle area here. It'll be this farmstead pushing through the trees here. Because to push the hill, you need to compromise the flank here. because this is how your opponent will reinforce it. If you can compromise this road juncture hill here, you can push the hill and take it. Now, looking to the left side of the map, taking this tree line here is very important. We talked about this for red. If you're able to hold this, you can cover your flank of the hill here. You have lines of sight here on where your opponent could move tanks up, and it helps protect your town. If you lose this, you can easily have your town infiltrated by infantry, either by just doing a suicidal frontal assault into here, getting good lines of fire on the forest here, being able to move up and cover their buddies to get into these tree lines to attack the town. Just drive down the road here, covered by these guys here, just to get into town that way. If you lose this, they can come up into the hill this way, because a lot of the time you'll probably be defensive in the town. If they've taken this and they're pushing into the hill here, you don't want to risk losing the town and the hill at the same time, from how I've seen players play this map. So take this tree line here and try to push this farmstead and threaten it. It'll put your opponent off balance. Now, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble here. Lines of sight in these forests right here aren't great, just because, as you can see, like, you get the coverage here pretty cookie cutter on this forest here, but you don't get any good lines of sight on the supply road here. Even right here, the line of sight on the opponent's supplies is good, but it's hard to maneuver into that tree line to get it, and it's very close to enemy positions, almost within 500 meters. Any machine gun in the game can hit you at that range, and most rifles can as well. So you're going to have to either play really aggressive, take this farmstead here. You can afford to lose it. It's always good to not lose it, but you can afford to lose it. You probably will lose it. Red's going to make an effort to take it if they know how to play the map. And it's okay. This is where blue's going to be more defensive, because you can give up ground here. As you can see, these flags are further back, and there are some good lines of sight here to help defend if you want to play defensive. And it's also hard to clear this town out as well, just because it is close to your resupply point here, and you can get some lines of sight to help cover the flank of the town if you're playing really defensive here. Plus, you have the hill to worry about. So don't be afraid to just give this up if you really need to, in favor of success over here. Don't spread yourself too thin, because if you do take this, your opponent will be focusing on taking it back, and that might drain resources from you. That's usually how I look at the map here. But the reason it's also hard to use this tree line here is this is water, and it's hard. You can't pass it with any AT guns or tanks. So you have to come through this little choke point here to get into the trees, which is fine, but your opponent knows you can do it, and it's slower. And as you can see, there's only one good line of sight, not much here to work with. Now, for the blue side, I will say this. If you can infiltrate the swamp here with like a recon unit and get through the town here and then push, you can really do some damage if you're getting like an AT rifle here and dropping fire in your opponent's resupply line, or even like a sniper. And it's really easy to do that. People usually don't put anything right here. You literally can just walk the AT rifle here and just walk his ass all the way up here and cut off the supply road with it, as well as probably getting some valuable information, as your opponent doesn't have a lot here to defend with, since the cover is very sparse. Now, one last thing, if you do take the hill here and you threaten this road juncture, your opponent's pretty much screwed, because if you get dug into the town here in the forest here, they're fighting out of their spawn. It's really hard to maneuver around here. There's just not a lot of good lines of sight for them to help take back these points, while you have complete command over the road there. Like right here, if you get like up in these trees here and this farmstead here, you completely command the bridge that your opponent has to come out of and spawn to take this point here. So that's Tsel. It's one of the more advanced maps, I would say, for new players to learn. There's a lot here to digest, because when you look at it, it's not your rolling plains of Belarusia. It's very dense forest, a lot of close quarter fighting, and if you're the wrong deck, it can be really intimidating. If you're like third armored, you're going to think to yourself, oh, I really have to abuse my Shermans. I can't use the infantry that effectively here. Just think about it. There are some really good places here you can use tanks effectively, and not just in a reckless manner like I was talking about earlier. And just be sure to use those lines of sight I showed you in the most strategic way you can, because red is at a disadvantage because of their flags, but there are certain positions red has that really helps them on this map. It's all about that mind game. If you can put yourself in that stance where you can say, I know what my goal is, and if I can achieve these key little objectives and just put a lot of pressure on these points, you're going to do great. Because one thing is, one little piece of advice I'll give is another thing that people think about in this game. They just think about flags. Like, oh, I got to get a flag. I got to get a flag. I got to get a flag. If all you're focused on is getting a flag, a lot of the time you can get cut off and you can get surrounded. But if you can cut off your opponent's ability to get to said flag, you're going to take that flag eventually. If they can't ever get to it, you'll slowly push up and take those positions. And this is a map where that's really seen a lot, because if you notice where I'm talking about, like, where you're going to be pushing with red, you're pushing a lot of empty space here, and you're getting into positions that help cut off these flags. Now, granted, if you get into this point here, you take the flag, but if you take this point here and here, what do you end up doing? You cut off their ability to effectively reinforce this flag. They can't get to the hill, and they can't get to reinforce this flag here. If you take the hill right here, there's a lot of lines of sight here you can take to cut off their reinforcements to get to this flag and this flag. If you take the, if you start threatening the forest here, what do? Again, you cut off their lines of reinforcements to take your flags here. So just keep that in mind. That's one big tip. And always, guys, stay tuned for the streams. I do a lot of deck reviews with viewers. It's a ton of fun playing with your guys' decks, because it's a lot of stuff that I don't think about, and a lot of units that I might not use just because I have my playstyle and I'm fixing it. I love playing with your decks because I see people play in ways that are completely different from mine, and a lot of the times it works really well. We've had some really good games, really competitive games with those decks. So do feel free to come by, chat. We're more than happy to have you there, and check the Discord. I post every deck that I review in there, and you can go see what other people are playing with, what they're thinking about doing with their decks, and what I saw in their deck and what I changed about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and please do take care and consider joining the Discord. Take care, guys.